Now I got this working. So we'll get back to normal. Shalom. I was trying to set up a new computer to stream. Been busy. I appreciate all of your prayers and your thoughts. I caught this video from Tabor, and I understand that some of you don't want to listen to him, but there is a lot of interesting meat in his knowledge. And, he actually says openly, and it's interesting, many Christians, Messianics, and even those in the Judaism camp and the Torah-only camp, they still don't believe what the Torah and the prophets explicitly say about the state of the world. The waters above the firmament, which rakia in Hebrew is the dome. But there's another interesting idea in this I want to get to.
Took it from something else. But because it's color and because it's nice, the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe is a three-level universe. As you see, you've got, I've got my pointer here. You've got the sky or the heavens with the God or the angels and so forth above. This is called the circle of the earth, the dome of the earth. You've got the planets, the sun, moon, and stars, the clouds, and then you've got the good earth here. I say the good earth, the Hebrew view, right? And God saw that all he'd made was good. You've got chaos on each side, which are the waters. You've got the firmament above, and then you've got Sheol in the Hebrew view. The Greeks called it Hades, correct? Which is the world of the dead. It's where departed spirits go when they die. It's not a fully animated life, as we'll see.
This is something I've been trying to get across to many people. The Hebrew conception of death in the Torah, most of the prophets and the writings, and there are like maybe two exceptions that can be proof text to believe otherwise, is that we are mortal beings. And you look at even the beginning. Let's look at that now. So when God created man in verse 26 and 27 here, and Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping things in the earth." And God created man in his own image, singular. So even though this is a plurality, it's not saying he is a plurality. In the image of God, he created him. He created them male and female. So then you go to the next chapter, chapter 2, right? And it talks about how Jehovah God formed the man out of the dust from the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And this is so important to know the Hebrew, that this is the Ruach. This is when we receive the Ruach from Yehovah that Solomon is talking about, that upon death, the Ruach returns to Yehovah, the Creator. But man became a living soul. See, he became a living soul when he had that breath of life breathed into him. Before that, he was just dust of the ground. And this is what it says at the end of the next chapter, right? Because he lost access to the tree of life that would allow him to live forever, it says, Yehovah Elohim said, "Behold, the man has become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and also take from the tree of life and eat it and live forever." So he was already mortal. And this destroys Christianity. Adam and Eve were already mortals. They were already going to die before they ate from the tree of good and evil. And if you look at the curse. This is another part they get utterly wrong, because they say, Adam was cursed with death. No, he wasn't. He was already going to die. What was cursed was his ease of access to food. And he said to the man, because you've listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, the ground shall be cursed because of you. See, it wasn't Adam that was cursed. It was the ground. You shall eat of it in sorrow all the days of your life. It shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you. And believe me, switching to a more agrarian life in the past couple of years, I absolutely see that. I have to work hard to make sure my food is producing consistently. The food having the greenhouse, I have to keep it watered because it doesn't receive any rainwater. The food outside, even on drier weeks, I have to water that still. But most importantly, I have to watch for pests. I have to keep the thorns and the thistles from overtaking my plants. I mean, there are some thorns and thistles that, we can get fruit from, like blackberries and raspberries and such. But most of them are just a nuisance. They just get in the way. There are living thorns, ticks, chiggers, mosquitoes. All of these things exist because of Adam's sin. But our flesh is not cursed. We are not inherently sinful. We can choose to do what's right. One of the things I wanted to go over, I don't know if I'll get to it in this installment, is I want to go through the most Jewish gospel in the New Testament and explain these ideas in parallel. That's why I'm using Bible time here.
The best illustration in the text is it's a shadow of the former self. And the best metaphor that's used primarily is sleeping in the dust, right? That the dead lie down, they go to Sheol. Sheol actually, in Hebrew, we don't know exactly the derivation of the word, but it might come from sha'al, to ask.
Oh, I absolutely believe they're connected. And, I don't agree with everything Craig Wynn says, but he made this connection in his book. Sheol and Sheol are absolutely connected. This is why I put in the description the covenant of death and Sheol, right? And indeed, wine betrays the haughty man, and so that he does not stay at home, he enlarges his appetite like Sheol, which is also Shaul, and he is like death, never satisfied. He also gathers to himself all the Gentiles, the nations, the Goyim, and he assembles himself all the peoples. Will not all these lift up a taunt son against him, even satire and riddles against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his? For how long? And makes himself rich with loans. Will not your creditors rise up suddenly, and those who make you tremble awaken? Indeed, you will become spoil for them, because you have taken many Gentiles, Goyim, nations. And if you don't believe me, look at the interlinear. Many Goy, with the proper form, it says the Moedim, the Goyim, the plural nations. These are not Jews that he's deceiving. Because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, and not Hebrews either. The Hebrews are among the nations, and I'll show that from Deuteronomy 4. Woe to him who is greedy for evil gain for his house, to put his nest on high, to be delivered from the hand of evil. You have counseled a shameful thing for your house by cutting off many peoples, so you are sinning against your own soul. And surely the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer it from the framework. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed. What bloodshed, you say? Well, even if you don't want to accept what Christianity has done in the name of God, of mass murder, of torture to people to convert. The whole premise is built on the murder of JC. The whole premise that you can accept the murder, the bloodshed of this man and be justified for it. And even in the book of Hebrews, which is bizarre, right? And when I saw this the other day, it says in Hebrews 12:24, and to JC, the mediator of a new covenant, and he goes over this like numerous times, and to the sprinkled blood, which speaks better than the blood of Abel. And you read this and you don't even connect it, but what he's saying is that you, like Cain, have sacrificed an innocent man for your sin. That's just mind-blowing, right? That's what the author is saying. That you have become Cain.
It might even mean something like, what is it? And I like that. If it does mean that, it really comes through. So somebody is living, and then they die, and we bury their body, and they depart to the dust and ashes, right? Abraham says to God, I who am but dust and ashes. Adam's told in Genesis, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. But then there is this idea of the animated self, or suke in Greek, or nephesh in Hebrew, and it goes into Sheol. So that's the view of the cosmos. Now, that's the ancient view that holds true throughout the Hebrew Bible, with the exception of maybe just a couple of late passages in the book of Daniel. And here,
right, and Daniel is a late book. Most of Daniel was written in Aramaic in the time of Antiochus of Epiphanes in the 2nd or 3rd century BC. It wasn't written during the exile. And this also is a problem for Ezekiel, because Ezekiel mentions Daniel. But many of the things Ezekiel said are not aligned with Torah.
here's a good psalm, if you just want to remember this psalm that summarizes it. I'll just read it all if you don't mind. Yet God, my King, is from old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Notice, in the midst of the earth. You did divide the sea by your might. You did break the head of the dragons on the waters. That would be all the chaos, these sea monsters that are on each side. You crushed the head of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness.
Sorry, that's interesting, right? Because one of the things that Christianity teaches is that on the image of death, he crushed the head of Leviathan. But it's saying in this psalm that Elohim, God, who's the only king, God, my King, crushed the head of Leviathan. Already thou didst crush the heads of Leviathan.
So this is mythological, but the forces of chaos that where the waters covered the earth are moved aside, let the dry land appear, so there's a human place, a kind of platform or arena for human activity and purpose. You did open springs and brooks.
Absolutely, and this was what the secularists call the megacontinent of Pangaea, which doesn't make sense from a secularist point of view. Why would all of the land be gathered together in one place like that? It doesn't make any sense that a world would form with all of the land on one side of it, right? But all of the land was in the center of the earth, and during the Great Flood, the land was divided, and you can still see the scars on maps in the middle of the sea where the waters from the great deep came forth and split apart this mega continent. And much of the ancient things, those things before Noah, of this people of great sin, are now buried under the sea.
Brooks, you did dry up the ever-flowing streams. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You've established the luminaries and the sun. It's very similar to a kind of poetic version of Genesis, correct? Genesis 1. You did, and you fixed all the bounds of the earth. You've made summer and winter. So this is the fundamental Hebrew view of human place. We're on the earth. We're on the good earth. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and all the ethical things that go with that. Now, here are two more Psalms. Psalm 115, verse 16, 17, and 18 actually capture exactly the three levels. It's wonderful when you go to verses like this. In other words, that drawing that I threw up there, look, the heavens are the Lord's, and that's L-O-R-D, Yahweh, Yehovah, right? The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he's given to the sons of men.
So the whole idea that, and this is one of the things I want to get into when I do my exegesis of Luke, the temptation of JC is very interesting, because somehow, even though the Hebrew Tanakh never says this, no longer does the earth belong to the sons of men, which in Hebrew is Bnei Adam, the sons of Adam. Now it belongs to Ha-Satan. But nowhere in the Hebrew scriptures do you see this idea. And in fact, in Job, which, I also have some questions about, because Job had to have been written much earlier. Much later than we are told. It has a writing style that points to things that are more Enochian in nature, like the resurrection of the dead. See, in Psalm 115, though, and he's going to read this, the dead do not praise Yehovah. They can't. They go down in silence. If the dead do not praise him, that means they aren't in heaven or hell. They're in the belly of the earth. And this is an idea that the New Testament actually is consistent in, even though it's more Enochian. Because the whole idea of the birth pains of the earth is that Sheol is going to open and the dead will come up. Not that they come down from heaven.
And as you know, B'nai is a generic term, so it doesn't leave you women out. To the children of men. The dead, this is the RSV, the dead do not praise Yahweh, nor do any that go down into silence. But we, the living, will bless Yahweh from this time forth and forevermore. Praise Yahweh. That's actually hallelujah right there in Hebrew. So the heavens are the Lord's, the earth is given to humans, and the dead do not praise God, nor do any that go down into silence. So it's called the land of silence. Other places it's called the land of deep darkness, the land of gloom. It's not torture. The Hebrews never had the idea that Sheol, you're punished, or any kind of hellfire. The Greeks developed a little bit of that.
That's important as well. And this is something that, Christianity is really harped on a lot of these verses in the New Testament that talk about torture. But as we'll go through when I talk about that in Luke, and eventually maybe the other Gospels, that was temporal of the body. That the body would be burned for being in the wicked city of Sodom, which is Jerusalem, when Rome came. That's what it's about.
But in Hebrew thought, it's the eternal retirement plan, basically. And if you're suffering a lot of pain and your life is not going so well, it could even be desirable, to lay down and simply rest from your labors, so to speak. But if you're fully active and living life, then it's mourned. Certainly the loss is a psalm which laments someone who feels I think it's a Psalm of David, I don't remember, you can look it up, but whoever wrote the psalm is near to death. And notice it reflects probably which we don't know. So see, this person is Shechanos, who is the contemplation. Gets cut down. A human breathes his last, and it's the RSV. A human.
So this is the section of Job I was talking about that talks about the resurrection. And Moses never talked about this, and neither did David. When David's son of adultery died, he says, he is now dead, and I cannot do anything for him, but eventually I will go to him. This is even what the prophet Samuel says when the witch at Endor brings him back to talk to King Saul. Where did he come from? He came from Sheol, and he tells Samuel, you will come to rest with your fathers. Even though he was wicked, he was still going to Sheol, to the same place. But Job here talks about being roused out of his sleep, an idea that David clearly didn't reflect himself, that his son and eventually him would be called from the grave, from Sheol, and come up out of the ground.
A human dies and is laid low. A human breathes his last, and where is he? Notice, where is he? Sheol. See? Where is he? So man, as waters fail from a lake and a river wastes away and dries up, so man lies down and rises not again till the heavens are no more. He will not awake or be roused out of his sleep. So there you get all the metaphors. Sleep, disappearing, awaking no more. Now here's what Job says that he wishes was the case, but he doesn't think it is the case. He just said, if this cosmos were being run correctly, this should be the case. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol. You see how it's a wish? He has no...
That's an interesting perspective, and he may be right. It still wouldn't push Job back too much further. It was definitely written in Hebrew, so it was written around the time of the exile, probably.
There's no indication in the book at the end that he believes this. Otherwise, the answer to Job would be life after death. He never says that. What God finally tells him is, what do you know about running the world, right? What do you know about running the cosmos? Basically, shut up. I run things, not you. And Job says, I repent, you're God, I wasn't there when you made everything. But here he's wishing, oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me until your wrath is past, that you would appoint me a set time and remember me. If a man die, shall he live again? See, now the answer is no, but it should be that way. You should do that. All the days of my service I would wait till my release would come. You would call and I would answer you. You would long for the work of your hands. And as you know in chapter 19, many of you know this, if not from the Bible, Handel's Messiah, I know that my Redeemer lives and so forth. But if you read that in take the JPS translation, a good Jewish translation, what it's saying is, I want my words right here written in stone with an iron pen, right? And then I'm dead. And I'll never come back. But someone, my Redeemer, the Goel, means a lawyer for my defense is going to read the case, it's written. He's going to, wait a minute, I've read this case. God is wrong. This guy was right. But if you read it in a good translation, he's just saying, somehow, if the world is right, if the universe makes any sense, there's got to be like a Redeemer that will argue my case with God. And that's essentially what he's saying here. That's really where we're left in the Hebrew Bible. There are many other passages. As you know, Moses, Abraham, David, they bury the dead. Remember what David says when he loses his child after mourning and weeping his heart out. Bathsheba's first child, he says, it's over. I will go to him, but he will not come back to me. Remember that? And that's how many people have felt throughout history. So if we switch cultures to Babylon, I'm not going to do Egypt, but I'm going to do Hebrew, Babylonian, and Greek, just to show you how widespread this is. This is a ubiquitous, universal view, and it's also in Egypt, except for certain pharaohs that supposedly have a life in the tomb, which really isn't that exciting, by the way. But Gilgamesh. Now remember Gilgamesh, he's mourning over the death of his friend Enkidu, and he wants to find the Babylonian Noah, right? And so he's wandering. It's this typical saga of the quest for immortality. Now, if you remember, at one point in his quest, he's told that there's a plant at the bottom of the sea, and if he'll dive down and get the plant and eat the plant, he'll live forever. He'll be like a god. It's the food of the gods. So he dives down, he gets the plant, But it's really tough to dive down and hold your breath like that to the bottom of the ocean and come back. And who knows what happens? He's tired, he falls asleep, and what happens? Anybody remember? Snake comes by and eats the plant. It's a, similar memory to Genesis. The snake comes and eats the plant. He wakes up and goes, oh no, I lost it. Well, at one point, even before that, he stops in at a bar, B-A-R, a bar, and Siduru, the barmaid, says to him, what are you doing? And he says, I'm wandering, I'm grieving over my friend who's died. I know he's going down to the Babylonian, it's called the land of no return in Babylonian, the land of no return. So we've got Sheol, Hades, we're going to get to, and the land of no return. I know he's gone down there. And she says, let me tell you something. Bartenders have a lot of wisdom. They deal with people all day long. So the bartender said, Gilgamesh, where do you roam? The life you pursue you will not find. When the gods created humankind, death for humankind they set aside. Life in their own hand retaining. O Gilgamesh, let your belly be full. Make merry day and night. Make each day a feast of rejoicing. Day and night dance and play. Goes on talking about rejoice with your wife and so forth. So that's essentially the message of the Gilgamesh epic. It's not for you. Accept your human fate. The gods are in heaven and they have life, and you're a human, and when you die, you're just going to die. Now, Hades, or Sheol, which is called the house of the dead, the house of no return, is further illuminated in chapter 7, verse 4, in which it's described as the house from which none leave who've entered it, on the road from which there's no way back, to the house where the dwellers are bereft of light, where dust is their fare and clay is dark. Go to the Greek level, just to be a first show. But Yale says, yeah, pick not soothingly to me of death, O glorious Odysseus. I would choose if I could live on earth to serve as a hired man of another, or some portionless man whose life, gold, solid gold, 1822, into a put 17 of 17. Uses this here. You know this, right? Is a cypress tree and a lake, and you're very thirsty. When you die, you get thirsty, right? You want to go across, you cross into the world of Hades, and the first thing you come to is a cypress tree and a lake, and you're very thirsty. When you die, you get thirsty, right?
So this is the bit I found fascinating, and it's in here, and I remember this from when I was a Mormon, and I looked into a lot of research in this, and it's interesting how Father brought me to where I am. After I left home, I left Mormonism, and I researched nearly every religion, even humanism. This is why, when I see guys like Justin and even friends I had that left for this humanistic side of things, this skepticism, I spent a lifetime there. 15 years of my life I spent in skepticism. I'm not going back to that. It's emptiness. It's nihilistic. What's the purpose of life? And this is one of the things I want to get across, that we are finite beings. We're not supposed to be focused on secret tokens and handshakes of how to get into the afterlife or to get into the resurrection. Focus on this life. The importance of this life is so precious, so valuable. When I was a Mormon, even as a child, they taught me the signs of the covenant, the secret handshake I had to give to the gatekeeper to enter the next life.
It takes a while to make it. By the way, the Caiaphas tomb, many of you know this, right? The Caiaphas tomb, found in the 1990s. There was a coin, a Greek coin, in the mouth of one of the family members in the ossuary that we think was to pay the ferryman. So here you have the high priest following this Greek custom. Isn't that interesting? So let's go to the longer text. This one I think you can figure out with a little explanation. You will find to the left of the house of Hades a spring, and by the side thereof standing a white cypress. To this spring approach not near. So that's very important. A dumb, uninitiated, unsaved soul will immediately land and see that water or that spring and go, oh, I'm thirsty. I'm going to drink that. That water is called lethe. What does lethe mean in Greek? Forgetfulness. And so you won't ever remember your past life. And then you'll be judged according to Greek mythology, and you'll get reincarnated, and you'll think this is your first time here, like all of you sitting here, right? Although some of you probably think you've been here before, right? So you might have drank from the right lake. But most of us, like, I don't think I've been here before. I was stupid. I just drank from that lake and came back and never knew it. But you'll find another, so keep going, from the lake of memory. Cold water flowing forth, but they're guardians before it. So this salvation is not free. You got to know what you're doing. And notice, this then is what you're going to tell those guardians. These guardians are not going to let you drink that unless you know this confession. I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. This you know yourselves. Notice how you get right in their face. Like you boldly confess this, right? You say, hey, I'm a child of earth and heaven alone's my home. Give me that water. And they go, oh, yes, please, here. But I'm parched with thirst and I perish. Give me quickly the cold water flowing forth from the lake of memory. You even tell what it is, so they know you're initiated. And of themselves they will give you to drink from the holy spring, and thereafter you'll have lordship among the other heroes.
Sound familiar? You must be born again, which in the Greek is what? Anoten, right? You must be born of the water and the Spirit. And even the baptism ritual is ritualistically from this.
Which means, and we know this from other texts, I'll explain in a minute, that you'll get to ascend to heaven and join the couches of the gods. Notice, my race is of heaven alone. So for the first time that I've been able to document in Mediterranean antiquity, someone is saying, these are unnamed people being buried, and they're saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm a human being. I did die, but that's not my essence. My essence is a connection with the divine. I'm actually from heaven, and notice, my race is from heaven alone, meaning my body wasn't even me, right? My essential self is from heaven. Now, my students have a bit hard time with this because they think it's kind of stupid. Like, oh, say, you go down in the underworld and all you got to say is this, and then you get saved. And I try to tell them, because most of them come from Christian backgrounds, it's like the proverbial St. Peter at the judgment gate. It isn't just the words, it's the meaning of the words. You remember Socrates said, know yourself? He doesn't mean, go to Freudian.
O God, hear the words of my mouth. O God, hear the words of my mouth.
O God, hear the words of my mouth. O God, hear the words of my mouth.
They're preparing for their death. And this is the whole thing with Christianity. You remember what I said? The covenant of death and Sheol? Well, that's just Paul, right? That, Romans 6, do you not know that all of us were baptized, which is actually the word immersed into JC, were immersed into his death. Therefore, we were buried with him. See, you're already initiated. You already know the truth. You're buried with him. You're dead with him. He doesn't ever teach that though, right? Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. He never teaches that, huh? That you have to die to enter this new life. And this is something that all believed clearly in the New Testament. 1 Peter 2. For to this you have been called, since Christos, which is just Messiah, and I don't know why the Christians transliterated this. It's just the word Christos, which in Greek meant anointed. Since anointed also suffered for you, which doesn't even make sense. It's so bizarre that these writers didn't even understand the Greek they were writing in, leaving you an example that you should also follow his steps. And this is what I was getting to here, right? That you have to follow in his steps. You have to bear your execution stake and die. Hebrews 12. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. It's your own shed blood that it wants, that you die with him. I want to see if it has this guy. Okay, so check this out.
Please do so in an orderly manner, row by row, as directed. We will now proceed with the presentation of the endowment.
Brethren and sisters, if you are true and faithful, the day will come when you will be chosen, called up and anointed kings and queens, priests and priestesses, whereas you are now anointed only to become such. The realization of these blessings depends upon your faithfulness. Brethren and sisters, as you sit here, you will hear the voices of three persons who represent Elohim, Jehovah, and Michael. Elohim will command Jehovah and Michael to go down.
And this is what Christians believe. They just use different names. Michael was a man, not an archangel. And this idea is from the New Testament. But, this triune creation, right? But, have you read your Bible? And I include Mormons, Christians, all of you. Isaiah 44:24. And we'll go to the good old King James first, right? Thus saith the capital Lord, thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am the capital Lord, that maketh all things, that stretches forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself. And when you look at the Hebrew, he's talking about the Creator, Yehovah, that Yehovah stretched out the heavens by himself and all alone. So how, Christians and Mormons, how do you justify that the God Elohim instructs Jehovah? That's not what any of the Hebrew scriptures say.
Down and organize a world. The work of the 6 creative periods will be represented. They will also organize man in their own likeness and image.
Jehovah, Michael, see, yonder is matter unorganized. Go ye down and...
Notice that this doesn't match the Hebrew conception of our world at all. This idea that there are many worlds created, this is something they believe in. And many of you may know this, but the TV series Battlestar Galactica was written by a Mormon. That's why it has the planet Kolob.
In psychology and figure out all your craziness. What he means is know who you really are. You're a mortal trapped in a corruptible body, but you're actually a God, and you belong in heaven. So this is like saying, for Christians, they say, who are you? What are you? I believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God who died for my sins. You go, whoa, okay, come on in. So it's not the confession. You have to mean that, right? It would imply that you live the life too, right? If you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and you're going to enter heaven, then you've also lived the life. Well, don't think that this didn't have ethics to it. This confession is not some silly little thing you say. I assume the guardians would know if you were falsely confessing it. They would probably say, oh, your race is of heaven alone, then why did you totally grab the material and act selfish and evil throughout your life if you were really looking to the heavenly world? You see? Now, we don't know the whole context of this. Some people call it Orphic. You heard that? Orphic prayers? It doesn't say Orphic, but we do know that Orpheus did entertain something like this. Some people say it's Pythagorean, following entomb. Plato, the themselves, perfect Greek philosopher. Fourth, dark, and as a man, he was a bird and then a fish, transmigration of the soul, and then a man. And as a man, as a human, he realized, this isn't my home. What a sad, dark, and evil place this world is.
What a sad, dark, and evil place. And, this is an idea that Christians absolutely harp on. And it's so sad. I hear this from my own family. The world is just so sad and dark. No, remember, we have dominion over the earth. So if the world is sad and dark, it's our fault. The world is what we make of it. He made us little creators to shape and form this place in His image. So if you see it as sad and dark, that's a reflection of your own soul, your heart.
I'm just passing through. My home is really heaven. You see the idea?
And that's so sad. This is something you hear too. He's gone to a better place. He's no longer with us. He's not gone to a better place. Remember, the dead do not praise Jehovah. Death is not a better place than life.
So something is happening here. 4th, 5th century Greece, but the Hebrews are also picking it up. Now, let me go to Cicero. I'll go back to the Hebrews in a minute, but we have this is Cicero, 1st century BC, so we're moving 100 years before Jesus, right? 1st century BC, Cicero's Republic. But you might not know it if you don't know it. It's mainly about Republic, how to build a great society. It's modeled after Plato's Republic. But look at chapter 6, or book 6. Book 6 is great. It has a story about Scipio, the famous general, Scipio the Younger. And I don't know if you remember your Roman history, but Scipio Africanus is the conqueror of Carthage, the Roman general. And so this is the grandfather of Scipio the Younger. And he's dead, okay? But Scipio the Younger has a dream. Now, this is just a dream, but Cicero records it, and he considers it to be revelatory. And what happens is Scipio, the grandson, meets the grandfather in the heavens. In his dream, he rises up to the heavens. He looks back on the earth. He said, oh, it's such a tiny speck. All those things that we think are so important. I'm thinking Carl Sagan, pale blue dot. Play it. I mean, there it is. All those wars, all that blood spilled, all our fights and arguments over nothing. Isn't that, he's getting the heavenly perspective. And then he sees his grandfather Africanus coming. And they greet each other, and they kiss, and they hug. And he says, give me a little lesson on the cosmos here, Africanus. Grandfather, tell me what it's like.
Does this story sound familiar? I know a certain man who ascended to the third heaven.
And so he asked him questions. He says, is it true what the philosophers say, that when you die, just your body dies and your soul has escaped the bondage of the body as from a prison, but that life of yours which men so call is really death?
It is. Life is a prison, death is freedom. This is what Pharisaic Judaism teaches too. Not to the same extent as Christianity, and he'll get to why. The Jews could have made Enoch canonized before the 1st century, but they didn't. Because many, many Jews read and believed the words of Enoch.
It's a huge move. It doesn't take place here, but it's reflected here. 100 years before Jesus. Essentially, life is death and death is life. It's
so powerful, so powerful, so important to understand. This is what was going in the air before the 1st century. Life is death, death is life. You remember what we read from Romans 6? and from the book of Luke. Death is life, and life is death. That's the covenant of death in Habakkuk 2. But also Isaiah 28 talks about it. Therefore, hear the word of Yahweh, O scoffers, who rule this people who run Jerusalem, because you have said, we have cut a covenant with death. Death is life. This is what you believe. You cut a covenant with death. And with Sheol, we have made a pact. With overflowing scourge will not reach us when it passes by. For we have made falsehood our refuge, and we have hidden ourselves with lying. Now, compare that to what he says, right? Romans 3:7. But if through my lie, the truth of God abounded to his glory, why am I still being judged as sinners? Paul understood he was lying. And he says it again in 2 Corinthians 12:16. But be that as it may, I did not burden you myself. Nevertheless, crafty fellow that I am, I took you in by deceit. It's like all of these are keying you, right? The covenant of death, immersed into his death, carry my execution stake. I have died so that he lives, right? All of these things, that life is death and death is life. It's a covenant of death. It doesn't glorify life. The preciousness, the brevity of it. As Isaiah says, all flesh is like grass. We don't take our time to realize the importance of life, to glorify Yahweh in this life, to do good, to help the orphan and the widow, to turn this world into a better place. Hallelujah. I hope I can get back to this. And thank you for your prayers.